I love a cheesy intro, man. I'm telling you, there's nothing better than a cheesy, like straight to the point intro. So, anyways,
Embrace the
welcome.
cheese.
Yes, I embrace it. I love it. I love
Mm.
it. And then when I'm making them, I'm like, this is so cheesy. I'm like, it's perfect. If it makes me giggle, it's perfect.
Right.
Anyways, welcome everyone back. You are not new here. You've been here before, but I will just give my spiel and then I'll let you introduce yourself. So this is my 32 fan series. So 32 different fans from all 32 teams in the NFL. And we are just talking about our teams, how we're feeling, getting a fan's perspective because we don't often talk to fans. And I love talking to fans and understanding more about teams. And believe it or not, all of these that recorded last season, before the season started, I went back and listened to the people that my team was going to play just to like see what the fans were saying. Because obviously the media doesn't talk about it in the right way.
Right.
So
right. They only talk about the Cowboys.
They only talk about the Cowboys, or if like there's drama. If there's drama, we're gonna hear about it. But like we don't get to hear about like progression or anything else other than drama. So we're not gonna do that here. So I will let you introduce yourself however you want to introduce yourself, and then let everybody know how long you've been a fan, how you became a fan, and just honestly whatever you want to share.
Yeah, my name's Joseph Camo. I have been an Arizona Cardinals fan more or less since they moved there. I'm that old. I remember when they moved there. Now, I was like 14 then, so I'm definitely dating myself. So I wasn't a huge sports fan, but that was, okay, this is my football team. And then as I got more into sports and into the 90s, I really started getting into it and watching the draft. So I'm from Arizona. My career has taken me to Georgia, but I was born in Arizona, lived a long time there. So for me, it's kind of this connection to my home in many ways. So I'm a diehard fan, been a huge fan, and I started a YouTube channel about 4 years ago or what have you. Built up a small little community of like-minded fans. Don't do as much with that YouTube as I used to, but here and there I do, active on social media. And just a diehard Arizona Cardinals fan who is way too nerdy about this stuff.
One thing I realized last year after the series, so everybody that I talked to that had a Twitter, I followed them, right? So naturally, then I became interested in their teams because I'm seeing what you all are tweeting and now I'm interested. I remember like halfway through the season, I was like, some of the things that are happening right now, you actually kind of called it pretty good.
I should go and watch to see like what kinds of things I actually called, because I think I usually feel like I have a good, kind of finger on the pulse of the team. But
the biggest one I remember last year is that you said you guys have everything, but you're going to struggle with pass rush. You're going to struggle there. And then when I was watching games, I'm like, they are 100% struggling there. Like he didn't lie. So So anyways, well, I think that's awesome. And obviously welcome back. Like I appreciate anytime anybody wants to collaborate with me again. And then I always feel weird, like reaching back out, because I feel like I'm being annoying. And then, so it's lovely when people are like, let's do this. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No, it was a delightful conversation last year. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I am really glad to be back.
I love that. So speaking of 2024 season, what are your initial thoughts on your team's performance, and what song do you think best represents your season last year?
So I'm pretty sure we talked about the rebuild process last year, because that was the drum I was pounding, right? And the 3-year rebuild process.
Yep.
And the way that process, in my view, goes, and I think a lot of people look at it this way, is very much been demonstrated by the Detroit Lions, right? Year one, struggle, turning over the roster, bringing in new players, and the team is feisty, but not winning much. Year two, you see improvement. Some of the draft picks start to find their legs, and get their kind of right. And you get a few more free agents in, and you're pushing for a playoff spot, but you're probably just missing it, right? And then year three, you expect to be a playoff team and build your run. And like the Cardinals, that was like exactly what happened, right? First year, was it 4 wins or what have you? Total roster turnover, a lot of young players, not very good, but scrappy, right? People talk about this is better than a 4-win team when you watch them play in their first year in Organic. Then last year, they went 8-9 and were in the playoff hunt. And the song is Landslide, because they got out to a good start.
They did.
Right? And people are like, hey, this team, I even was like, played.
I messaged you. I was too. I was like, wait, are they going to do this?
We're going to win 10, 11 games and make the playoffs, because we were like 6-4, was it? Like through a tough start.
Yeah.
right? And then I'm like, hey, I mean, you look at the schedule, like that's a winnable game. That's a winnable game. Like it seemed like 10 was the low. And then it just, the wheels fell off and the landslide came crumbling down.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if in a vacuum, right, or if you told me going into the season they will be 8-9, I would have said, yeah, okay, that's like that year 2. That's exactly what you think. Improvement from year 1, probably making a playoff push, but fall short. I think a lot of people who really understand how rebuilds work would have been very happy with an 8-9. Like, that's progress. Kyler was healthy pretty much the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it, right? But the way it happened in real time, right? You build us up, you give us hope, right? Right? You're like, hey, this team's going to do something. And then, right? The way it happened caused fans to be understandably very disappointed. But if you look at it, right, from the 10,000-foot view, 8-9, year 2 of a rebuild, after winning 4 games the year before, that's a good year 2, right on track with that kind of 3-year thing we're talking about, right?
Yep.
But it was disappointing the way the back half fell apart for the fans.
Yeah, I could see that. So after that, the season happened. So I don't know about you, but this is how I watch seasons, right? So I'm a Steelers fan, but then I follow Colorado and Texas. Texas played longer than anybody. And I felt like when I was in it, I was filling away. And then as soon as the season ended, it kind of took me like a week or 2. And then I was like, okay, let me assess what happened. Like, let me see what happened. After you kind of had that moment and then free agency started, how do you feel like your team did? Like, do you feel like you all addressed anything in free agency? Did you feel better by the time free agency? Like when at what point did you kind of look back and go, you know what? Okay, that wasn't what I wanted, but now I at least see we're moving in the right direction.
I have to give this disclaimer that my view on free agency is part of the bigger roster building process. And I don't believe teams should be as aggressive as some fans want them to be. I think you build first and foremost through the draft, and then you kind of fill holes in free agency, but you don't want to go too crazy with the spending, because what ends up happening is you pay B- players A- salaries in free agency, right?
Exactly.
But if you draft that player who's an A player, like case in point, Trey McBride, drafted in the second round, he's become a top 3 tight end, depending on who you ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they paid him. And every Cardinals fan who has a reasonable mind is excited to be paying him that money. We are so glad. And so I'm like, you draft those guys, and if they become that top of the market guy, then you pay them. But if you don't do that through the draft, you're paying a guy who is 70% of the player, 85% of the money, right? That you're paying Trey McBride.
You're paying a guy. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense? 70% of the amount, but you're paying him 85% of what you're paying Trey McBride. I'd rather pay 100% Trey McBride than 100%. So what you do is you focus on the draft, and then the free agency. Sometimes you have to overpay a little bit, but you do it with shorter contracts. You do it with non-premium positions that don't end up costing as much. Overpaying a guard, well, actually this offseason, maybe not so much that they were getting paid, but overpaying an inside linebacker, right? Yeah. Is not the same as overpaying a cornerback, right? Or a receiver.
I agree.
Yeah, so they took a measured approach. For some fans, that was not good enough. But then they did this year spend a little bit. They spent for Josh Sweat, right? They spent for Dalvin Tomlinson. Dalvin Tomlinson, they spent a little bit on those guys, but they're also not contracts that are going to be so long-term, right? That they're going to prevent us from paying our guys. So they found some guys like that. They got a few other, guys that were value free agents. Calais Campbell, right? Who they brought in, right? On a 1-year contract, and I mean, obviously a huge fan, but when we talk about the draft, that is very relevant for who they picked in the first round in terms of having a good room for them. So they had the cap room, and they spent a little bit, but I think they did it very smart and addressed the pass rusher and defensive line, as we talked about earlier. That was the big thing. So they addressed areas of need, and they did it in a smart way, but still focused on the draft and building players to the draft. And what they did is they set themselves up so they had, at every position of need, they had someone who was at least serviceable as a starter coming out of free agency. And then in the draft, they could go with their board. So
yeah. And I remember last year you mentioned you could kind of see where they were going. Like you could see what was happening, moves that were making. You felt like they were being very smart. You feel like they were really kind of being methodical as opposed to just doing things. Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel
absolutely.
like they're okay, cool? Because I
Monty
remember that stuck
Ossenfort,
with me from last year.
the general manager, Monty Ossenfort, has a plan. And again, like, and my view on roster building is not just because the Cardinals are doing it, so I like it. Like, there's some great articles on Sumer Sports. It's an organization that does, it's like some former PFF folks and other folks, and they're doing stuff having to do consulting for teams. Eric Eager from PFF, who's now working for the Panthers, was one of the people who helped start that. And he published some articles on there that talk about how you should approach drafting and free agency in the premium positions in the draft, non-premium positions through free agency. It's just all these things. And Monty is like almost to a T following that playbook. Maybe a few minor things. He maybe drafts running backs a little earlier than I would like, but that's okay. That's the Patriots have always done. Yeah. And he comes from the Patriots organization. That's how they do things. But if you look at his early round picks, like receiver, offensive tackle, right? First round picks, right? And then defensive tackle, pass rushing interior defensive lineman, which I would argue is a premium position. When you find a defensive lineman who can stop the run and rush the pass, that's a first rounder. And second round, cornerbacks, edge rushers, right? Not taking guards and inside linebackers in the first round, right? But taking those in round 3 and 4 and 5, right?
Yeah.
So
you're there. So let's talk about the draft. So I know, obviously, first round pick was Walter Nolan. I had him going 15. So when he went 16, I was like, you messed up my board. But
how dare you?
But how do you feel? I mean, I think it was a fantastic pick, just knowing what I know about the Cardinals. And I will be honest, I know more about West Coast teams now because I do this than I probably did before I started talking to fans over there. I say over there as if it's totally far. But so how did you feel about the draft? Like, did you like the draft picks? I know you all got a Texas player, but we will leave him where he's at. But how did you feel overall about the draft?
I loved day 1 and 2. And for day 3, I liked a few picks. And with the rest, I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust the GM on this. I was not as high in day 3, but I didn't hate it. There were just some other players I liked. But day 1 and 2, I just think they nailed that. You talk about Walter Nolan. That was through some of the live streams and YouTube stuff that I do, that seemed like the player that Cardinals fans were pining for the most. Like, that's the guy who was really showing up in a lot of mock drafts. And it was a position of need. Interior defensive line was a very, and a very big area of need for us. In fact, like coming out of the end of the season, just me and everyone else that I know were saying defensive line and edge.
Please, on repeat.
And exactly. Can we get a couple of them, please?
Yeah.
And I talked about this before, like with interior defensive linemen, you've got your guys that are just run stoppers, right? And those guys you can pick in the 3rd round. 3rd and 4th round, you can find a guy who can be a nose tackle, who can stop the run, but doesn't offer much in pass rush. And then if you've got a guy who's got a little pass rush, but he's not great against the run, you get him maybe round 2 or round 3, right? But if you've got a guy who can stop the run and gives you something in pass rush, those guys go in round 1 usually, and sometimes round 2. And like, if you look at Walter Nolan's PFF grades, his run defense grade was 91.6. Like, that is.
He was, I watched him.
Okay.
I watched him. I think Walter Nolan was the guy that I was like, he's not going, no one's going to talk about him. He's not good because other people are talking about other things. And I was like, he's going to sneak in here. That's why I thought he was going to be top 15. I'm like, he's going to sneak in. A team's going to sneak in and say, yes, please, you over here. Like, come on.
The biggest question with him was kind of the maturity stuff, right? And I've listened to interviews with him, and he comes across as maybe like a young kid who, whatever, like personalities all vary. But I talked about in free agency, they brought in Calais Campbell, right? And Dalvin Tomlinson.
Perfect for him.
Right. Just some really great veterans to kind of, help model for him how to be a professional. So, and the general manager and coach, Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon, they both spent a lot of time with him and they felt good about him. And Monty, I think the perception of him is if he doesn't, and Jonathan Gannon, that culture is really big. And if they don't feel good about that you're going to fit, they're not going to take you. And I know, like, personality and culture stuff gets a little weird, because everyone groups that all into off the field stuff. But like, there's being a little immature, and then there's being someone who is criminally problematic, like some other folks, right? And that's very different, right?
I agree.
And then there's also being a little immature but loving football, and being immature and not loving football. And the two players from the Cardinals past that were most often invoked in trying to describe Walter Nolan, people who loved Nolan as a potential pick were describing him to, or who hated the pick, who did not want him, were saying it's another Robert Kimdiche, right? Another guy who had some maturity issues but didn't love the game. But people who love the pick compare him to Darnell Dockett, another guy who had some quirky, maybe maturity, personality stuff, but was a great player, right?
Right.
So, and then you look, there's guys like Tyrann Mathieu who had some maturity stuff, but then he comes in the league and he gets his stuff together and has been right. And maybe some people don't like some of his opinions, but he's been a model citizen as an NFL player and has had a great career. So I'm going to hope and trust that the front office, the brass, knows what they're talking about, and that they did their due diligence and their read on him is correct.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I feel like it's hard. It's fun for me because I'm a college football fan too. So I get to watch all of it. So like when I see somebody get drafted, like I remember the plays that I watched him make during the game, because I think games are different than film, right? Because you can rewind it. A game, I remember that you made the play,
Yeah.
But one of the things I've realized when I watch NFL content creators evaluate college players is they didn't see the games and they didn't see the week to week. And so I watch, coaches do press conferences and so it's interesting though, to see what people pick up on versus me being like, no, but have you seen him on the field though?
Right,
like, are we seeing the same thing? So it's just interesting to see like how people dissect different people. Same thing happened with Kelvin Banks. I mean, he's top 10 pick, went to the Saints, and people are like, I don't know if he's ready to go. I'm like, watch some film and come back to me. And now everyone's like, oh, okay. I'm like, because they picked up on the quirkiness, but not the play. And I'm like, we got to pay attention here. So I understand. So who would you say was like your favorite pick where you were like, yes, absolutely. And then who was the pick where you were kind of like, okay, that's fine. Like, we'll figure it out.
So my favorite pick was Will Johnson.
Okay.
And this is the pick that they're being very much lauded for. This is a guy who was, a lot of people's big boards in the top 15, but because of the concerns about the long-term prognosis of his injuries, and it's not even like he's injured, right?
What is it?
There's some knee issues and some other foot issues. I'm not even sure exactly what they were, but I think he's had some injuries that he's recovered from. But they're the kinds of things that people worry about re-injury. And there's people who know much better than I do who could speak much more eloquently about that. Okay. But what I understand is that the reason he slid to the second round is there's just teams that wonder, is he going to get a second contract? That's kind of the idea.
Fair. Okay.
So, is he going to be healthy through a second contract? So he slid, but he is a perfect fit schematically, kind of that zone cornerback, what they do. He's, by many people's account, one of the, second or third best cornerback in the draft, depending on who you ask, in terms of talent. So, potential lockdown cornerback, which is an area of need for them. They've drafted a lot of cornerbacks since Monty's been here, and they're not all going to be able to make the roster, but they haven't had that true number one guy emerge. So the Cardinals, have been very much, this is the pick that everyone's talking about as being a great pick for them. It's a risk reward, with the injury thing. But yeah, I mean, I love taking that chance there, right? Yeah. Round two, a guy who could be a lockdown cornerback if he lives up to his talent. And then it's just a question of, does he have a long enough career? But even if they only get one contract out of him at that level, that's still something.
Let's make it the best. Yeah. Let's make it the best, like 5-year deal. Like we can make it. So I'm not asking for much. Yeah. Was there anybody that you were kind of like, it sounds like you were kind of like, there was guys that you didn't like love, but you weren't like, oh gosh, you were just kind of like, okay.
So whatever. On day 3, right? I mean, like, to round out day 2, Jordan Birch, the edge rusher, I hadn't looked at him much. And the more I look at him, I get it. Big, lot of good tools. Maybe they could use a little development, but they needed an edge rusher. There were a few other guys on the board I liked, but I trust that Jonathan Gannon knows what he wants in that position. And this is the guy they picked. And it's a pick that was roughly, I mean, it was a good pick in terms of projections, and people like the pick. So I have no problems with that. I like, Cody Simon, the linebacker. We needed a linebacker. I love that. The one that maybe the biggest question for me is Denzel Burke, the cornerback at Ohio State. And it's not that I don't like the player. He's a good fit, zone scheme. He's a good fit, but like, they have drafted so many cornerbacks. Like they drafted Max Melton, Keitrell Clark, Garrett Williams, Elijah Jones, who was injured, didn't play out of Boston College. Another guy, I forget his name, in the 7th round. Like, that's like 5 guys they drafted, and now they drafted 2 more, like 7 guys. And then they have Sean Murphy-Bunting, they signed as a free agent, who didn't play terribly well, but they, and then Sterling Thomas, the 5th, who started for them some last year. And not that I'm tied to any of those guys. It's just you're going to carry 5 cornerbacks, maybe, right? So
sounds like a waste. Sounds a little wasteful.
Like, is he going to be on the team? But I get the fit. And I know some people talked about before this year, he had been thought of as maybe a fringe 1st round pick, more of a 2nd round pick. The physical tools, I don't think, are quite there. And he had a down year. So now he goes around in round 5. So I'm not saying I don't like the player. It just felt like, do they have room for him? Right.
Right. Yeah.
The guard, Hayden Connor, they got in the 6th round. There were other offensive linemen on the board that I liked better, but Monty Ossenfort comes from the Patriots. They have a good history of finding offensive linemen on day 3 and the interior offensive linemen. So I'm just going to trust them there.
Yeah.
7th round pick, the safety out of Nevada, is a really physically, gifted player who didn't start until just this year and, was playing at Nevada. So the competition wasn't great, but he probably going to be a special teams demon. So I'm fine with that.
I love those guys.
Yeah. Right. So overall, I think it's a good draft. And I know some people have said, and I would probably tend to agree with this, you would have liked them to maybe go earlier in offensive line. I like where the offensive line is at, but I want them to kind of keep adding pieces. And they did add one, but maybe would have liked to get a little bit higher end.
You all have another Texas offensive lineman, don't you? Or
I think
is his Williams? Wait, what's his name? I think you guys have. I cannot think of his name.
The offensive line. Let's see, Christian Jones.
There it is. Yeah. I'm awful with names. I'm like, I can remember what number 74 did all night long, but if you tell me 74's name, I will never remember what 74. I'm like,
right.
What was his name again? I can't remember. So that's awesome. So having said all of this, and last year it was close, but it didn't just quite work. Where do you all think would you still say that you're rebuilding? Would you say that you're contenders? Would you say that you're contenders in the division? Would you say that you're like 100% going to the playoffs? Like, where do you think you all fit as of right now? Like, what is your expectation for this coming up season?
Based on what they've done and what they've done to fill the roster out, and you look at edge rush was a bigger need. You've got Josh Sweat now, right? You've got Walter Nolan's going to bring something. Darius Robinson, 1st round pick last year, who came on late, is going to help with that. Jordan Birch, we'll see what they've added some pieces. Calais Campbell on the defensive line, and then the cornerback, upgraded. Hopefully, they've hit all those areas of need. And then you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. going into year 2. You've got Trey McBride. To me, this team is where you think they should be on year 3 of that rebuild to contend for, at least to be like contend for the division. And if they don't win that, get a wild card spot. So to me, if they don't make the playoffs this year, I will be disappointed. I will feel like they did not meet their potential because, last year you look at the pass rush and the cornerback room. It's like, yeah, okay. If they make the playoffs, they're overachieving with where the roster's at. It's not there now. They've got a 2nd round pick last year, Max Melton, on year 2. And I don't know how close you've watched, but we've got our slot cornerback, Garrett Williams, pretty damn good. He was the 3rd highest graded cornerback in the league. A lot of people don't know about him.
I listen, I was sold. Like last year, I was like, I was ready. I'm like, this is happening. Like Arizona, like this, it's happening. I loved everything. And then I feel like one day I just woke up and it just wasn't quite.
Yeah.
So, and then, so, okay. So having said that, who do you think is like the most underrated player or the most underrated group on the team? Who do you think, like what position group do you think is the most underrated? Or maybe it's a player that you're like, man, this guy just doesn't get enough credit for everything that he's doing for us.
That's really a great question, because there's some guys that do get plenty of credit. Guys like James Conner, but deserve all of it and probably a little more.
Forget. Yeah, you guys have
been
James
so
Conner.
Good. The underrated player is Garrett Williams. He has just become a stud at that slot corner spot. Third round pick a couple years ago. He fell to the third round because of injuries, and they got him. He didn't start right away, but again, his PFF grade was 82.0, which is the third highest of all cornerbacks last year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Garrett Williams is just a stud slot corner for them. So that's the most underrated. I will say another unit that I think is a little underrated, and I'm not saying that they're world beaters, but I think they're better than people realize, is the offensive line. Cardinals have had bad offensive lines for so long, and they're just they've got stability. They're like, you got Paris Johnson Jr., who's become just a solid starting left tackle. Jonah Williams missed a lot of the season, but he played well when he was there. You've got Evan Brown, left guard, who's just solid but not elite. You've got Yelda Froholt, who they signed, who was the sixth highest grade center. And then they've got a third round pick from last year, Isaiah Adams, who, he struggled a little bit. He's a rookie. But he's come in year two, started some. So I think people are so used to the Cardinals having bad offensive lines for so many decades.
I can see that.
They're competent. And
right.
There's this philosophy on roster building. Another thing that the folks at Sumer wrote some really good articles about. And we may have talked about this before. There's certain positions that are strong link positions, others that are weak link positions. And with offensive line, it's a weak link position, meaning they're as good as your weakest link. You don't want a weak link. You're better to have 5 solid but not great players than a couple stars and then guys who aren't very good. And they've built a line that has that solid, kind of pieces across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is something that, like, what's your hot take? What is something, and I didn't say this at the beginning of this, but all the questions that I'm asking, he's very aware of the questions that I'm going to be asking. Like, I feel like sometimes people think I come on and I like have a gotcha, and because I memorize these questions, and then people are like, yeah, there's no way you prepared them. I'm like, yes, I did. Everybody knows the questions. Like, this isn't like a test.
Yeah.
So, I'm very generous. I'm like, here's the questions.
Right.
So just FYI, like nothing I'm saying. I know sometimes it looks like I'm thinking, but I'm just trying to remember the question. I'm not thinking. So just FYI.
How can I get him to? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel like some people are like, yeah, there's no way. They're like, you looked like you just made that question up. I'm like, no, it's because I was trying to remember the question. So I didn't say that at the beginning. So just want to say that. But what is the hot take? What is the hot take about your team that other fans might not agree with that you have?
And I'm not usually a hot take kind of a person, but what I would say, my hot take is probably that Kyler doesn't need to throw a lot of touchdowns for this team to be good. In fact, the type of offense they run, he probably is never going to throw 35 touchdowns, even because they're going to be a run heavy offense. Mm-hmm. They're going to build around the defense and the running game. And what they need from him is efficiency, converting third downs, and being a threat. And if he ever has an MVP type season, it's not going to be a 35 touchdown season. It's not going to be a 4,500 yard season. It's going to be like a 3,700 yard, 27 touchdowns, 800 rushing yards, and 12 rushing touchdowns, and crazy through the ceiling efficiency. Some people have been like, just commenting, well, when's Kyler going to have his breakthrough season? They're expecting him to have that leap to be the 35 touchdown quarterback, guy. And that's just not how he's built. He's built to be a guy who is really dangerous, and the numbers don't look crazy. But if your defensive coordinator trying to deal with him and the way they've built this offense, you're like, I'd rather face Jared Goff than what he does if they get it right. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'd rather face that 35 touchdown guy than this 27 touchdown guy who gives me fits. So like the MVP version of Kyler doesn't put up the kind of stats people think he does.
I like it. If you were GM for a day, what is the very first move you'd make?
You know, I like most of what they've done, but I'm going to give one. And I hate to say this because I know the coaches know what they're doing better than I'm doing, but put Zaven Collins back at inside linebacker. And I know that's more a coach thing, but I'm going to call JG in the office.
Okay.
Like, come on, man.
Okay.
He's I know deep down I'm wrong about that, but it just feels wrong.
You could be, but the thing that I always tell people is you could be 100% right, and it just could be an oversight from the team.
Yeah, maybe they made a decision to move him to edge, though. So
Yeah,
I don't think.
Yeah. Well, I always say so. As a Steelers fan, sometimes I'm like, "Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?" And then Tomlin will come out and have a press conference, like in week, and he'll say something, and I'm like, "Oh, he didn't. Oh,
yeah,
he didn't realize it until it happened, until he saw it too." So like, I wasn't crazy. So.
I will say though, just in my aged wisdom or whatever it is, over the years, and this is something this is not just sports, this is just in my professional life. And you have a career, and I know you'll get this. You work in an organization, and you're like the people in leadership. You're like, why in the world did they do that? Mm-hmm. But when you do get that peek behind the scenes and you understand the decisions they had to make and the pieces that are involved that you maybe weren't aware of, you're like, oh, I didn't realize all the things they have to weigh in this. And there's other things, right? So like, I believe we should be critical and hold people accountable, but I also at the same time tend to be a little more generous in if I think someone knows what they're doing. They know things I don't know. And so and some fans who are more critical feel like I'm not critical enough of teams sometimes, but I also understand like GMs and coaches know a lot more than I do. Yeah. Not that they can't make mistakes, but sometimes they had a good plan and it just doesn't work because something falls that they can control.
And I think that part of this is you have an opinion, but you could trust with a team. I mean, they see them all the time. So I mean, we're seeing what we see, but they see them all the time. So maybe there is a good explanation. Good for you for showing them grace. Good for you. I respect that.
It's hard sometimes because you want to be angry, right?
You want to be like, are you dumb? But you're like, wait, you're not dumb. I'm sorry. That was aggressive, but come on. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, what was that? Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, but fix it. But anyway, so I totally understand. So my favorite part of this is like the overtime question. So I have 4 questions for overtime. And so this has been actually really fun to hear people say. So which division rival do you love to hate the most and why?
I'd say it's the 49ers. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to get into all of it, but let's just say there's a certain player who's a superstar for them who I just don't like his worldview. I think you know exactly where I'm at, but I'm not going to go there. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I respect that. Yeah.
But it predates him. It's just something about, I think there's a little bit, I mean, I know some 49ers content creators who have been very kind to me, who I love. So obviously it's not all of them, but there are some elements of that fan base that just, So I think the 49ers is, and, obviously they've been really good, at points. So, so that you always hate the team that has had some success. So I totally get that. But yeah, Niners.
I love that. So if you could change one thing about your franchise, what would it be? So ownership, stadium, uniforms, location, anything, what would it be?
I'm going to give, I'm teetering on how to be generous and not generous, but it's an ownership thing. Michael Bidwill, and I met him many years ago. It's a family legacy thing. And here's where I will say, people have been, he has been criticized for his spending, the money side of things, not spending on facilities and not having, whatever, kind of being cheap. And then he's been criticized from some reports that have come out about interpersonal stuff, how he treats people. I'm going to give him grace on the financial side of things, okay? Because I think people don't realize is there are ownership groups like the Cronkies that own the Rams who have crazy money.
Yeah.
And that matters. And people think, well, you know, they think all these owners are, you know, the same level of billionaire, but they're not, right?
They're not.
There are some owners that legitimately like don't have as much money. And like the Bidwells, their money is from the team. And, you know, it's a lucrative play, you know, teams can be lucrative, but the kind of spending that you're having to compete with for the kinds of facilities. So could he have been, you know, spent more? Yes. But I think the expectation some fans have of what the ownership can do with the Cardinals compared to a Rams team that has, or even the Broncos, like their ownership's the Walmart money, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That makes sense.
So I'm gonna give them a little grace on the money side. Like maybe he could have spent a little more on some things and be a little less cheap in some areas, because there's some areas he was cheap where he didn't need to be, like in terms of like things in terms of food and things like that. The big things like facilities, I get they've got some limits. But the interpersonal stuff, reports of how he treats people, and just some of the stuff when there was a former executive that there was sort of this thing that came out, and just the way that they kind of did a little bit of a smear campaign, and just reputation he has of being someone who can kind of go off on people. That stuff, I got no, you know, that one I can't.
Yeah, we got to fix that.
Right.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. Like it's free to be a good human. It's free. It's literally free.
Right. So, and I think most fans would tend to agree that the ownership, if you polled fans, Cardinals fans, ownership would easily be number one on your list of those things. The things you asked, what would you change? That would be number one.
Okay. So if you could swap one player from your team with one from rival, let's open it up. One from rival, if you choose, or NFL, who would it be? Who would it be and why?
Boy, so I started with the division.
Yeah, I was going to say. Okay, the first person I recorded with really opened this up for everybody else. So I'm like, we're going with it. Open it up. Like, you tell me who would that player be?
I'm going to set aside the obvious, you know, Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think
nobody has said Patrick Mahomes yet, actually.
Okay, like clearly, I love Kyler, but if Patrick Mahomes is the obvious answer to me, like he is a one of one, but I'm going to give you some different answers that are a little more nuanced. I think if you're going with the division, and this might be not the first answer people would think of, but I would actually like Fred Warner, because we need an.
Oh my God. I had a feeling you were going to say.
Okay, really?
Nobody plays linebacker like Fred Warner.
Right?
Absolutely nobody. Absolutely. I got you. I'm with you 100%. That's my guy. Like, right. I'm with you 100%.
They could use that. That. You know, I think aside from that, you know, you could look at like someone like Mason Crosby, like a really great edge rusher, right? They could use someone like that, right? But they like bigger edge rushers. That's kind of what go with him. And he's a little younger than some of the other players. I mean, you know, some of the other options. But yeah, you know, Fred Warner may not be the first name most people would think of, but if you're going within the division, that's the choice. He would really elevate the whole defense. He'd be a force magnifier.
I love it. Okay. And then describe your fan base. Describe your team's fan base in 3 words.
Oh man. Does it have to be 3-word phrase that connects?
Some people have done 3-word phrase, and some people have just picked 3 words. It gets a little vulgar.
This is going to sound like I'm being really critical, and I hate to say this, but it's something about the nature of the place of this. I love the team, but we're a little fair weather. Is that 1 or 2 words?
Okay, we'll give you 1 word for that because I want to hear what else you have to say.
Okay, I'm going to say transient, meaning like the Arizona is a lot of people who are just relocated there from the Midwest. Okay. And that's, you know, so some of them they're not from there, and then they're that maybe they become fans, but you really got to sell them, or then they're fans of other teams, right?
Okay.
And gosh, I really hate this. You know how there's some fan bases that are just like, they have this long history and they know their stuff and they're just, they just know their team and they know
That's how the
everything.
Steelers. Yeah, that's how Steelers.
Yeah.
Honestly, whenever I do this, I feel like Steelers, Ravens, 49ers, like those fans just like know Packers. Those fans like know the intricacies of how an offensive lineman should step.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just hate to say this because it's a team that now it's been there for a while, but it's still, it's still kind of, they've been there for a while, but it doesn't have that storied history in that city like other places. So I'm gonna throw a really fancy word: neophyte.
Ooh, okay.
It's like kind of
Can you give me a definition of the word?
Yeah, I'm got a person who is new to a subject, skill, or belief. Okay. So it's a fan base that is just like, there are people like me who've been fans, but for a long time, but like a lot of other teams, you got people my age who their parents were fans.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And you don't have as much of that with the Cardinals. You do have multiple generations, but it's just, it's a neophyte fan base, a new to the subject compared to other teams because they moved there in 1988, which I know is not just yesterday.
But it's different when somebody's been a fan since 1950.
Yeah,
there's a 40-year difference.
And there are some fans of the Cardinals who have been fans since they were elsewhere, right? I've met some of them, but it just, and I know fans watch this are going to be like, why are you slamming us? But I think people,
I don't think that's a knock, though.
I think it's just being real about who we are.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. This is why I don't think it's a knock. I always tell people, if you know where you're at, like last year before the season started, I was on Texas defense because I didn't know what they were going to be because they hadn't showed me yet. And I was like, I don't know. You guys just want to crown them because they're Texas. Like, I want to see the defense. And people are like, what do you, blah, blah. So it took me a time. And finally I was like, all right, fine. It wasn't a knock though on the defense. It was just, I wasn't sure yet. I just needed to be shown. And I feel like what you're saying is, we know football, we love football, all those things, but like that deep rooted, like all of like the underbelly of the franchise just isn't there. And I mean, they haven't been around as long as the Packers, as the 49ers, as
or at least in the city. They've been around longer than a lot of those teams. But
you're right, because you're right.
Chicago, they're one of the first 4 teams.
And that's the other. They are. You're right, but where were they before?
Well, St. Louis before here.
St. Louis.
And they've been in Chicago.
I forget the Cardinals. So, you know what? Fan base, I had it all wrong. Y'all been around for a long time, but you've moved around a lot.
Exactly.
You've moved around a lot. And that's what makes it like that. Interesting. I didn't think you were going to say that. And I learned a new word. I like it.
If I'm admitting, I Googled synonyms for novice.
I like it. Yeah. You know what they say, like, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you so you continue to learn, right? So there you go. Like, you're in my circle of people that I'm like, what word? What's the word? Tell me, explain that to me. So,
well, awesome. I think you're underselling your own intellectual, kind of prowess. So
well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, that is all the questions I have. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to know about the Cardinals, anything you want to tell the fan base. I did last year when I did this, I was like, no one's going to care about this. Like 5 people will watch, like if I'm lucky. People like started to watch and people were like, they were like, when's my team? When's my division? And I was like, oh, okay. You like this? Okay. Yeah. Right. So, and my channel's grown since then. So who knows? Like, you might be speaking to a team of 2 or a group of 100. Who knows? At this point. So anything else you want to share about you or the Cardinals or anything you want us to know about the Cardinals?
I think we've covered most of it. This is, I would say if you're a Cardinals fan, go into this year being excited. I think it just feels like it's on track. I'm not saying they're going to make a Super Bowl run, but it just feels like they've got the pieces there. And, there's some things that they need to improve on from last year, but like they coached up a defense that didn't have as much talent as they needed. They've got good talent now. I think there's reasons to be excited. Yes, the wheels can fall off. But go into the season being optimistic. And if it falls apart, that's life. But I say let's enjoy the season because I think it's going to be a good one.
I like it. I'm excited. I'm tuned in. Like I said, I watched more West Coast football last year than I think I've ever watched all year. And it's because of these. Like, I feel connected to everybody I talk to. Like, once this is over, I still feel connected. And so I'm like, when your team's on, I'm like, I'm going to watch this for him so I can see what that's like.
Right.
It's like this weird thing that I didn't expect to happen, but I love it because now I'm anyways. So thank you for joining. Thank you for coming on, chatting with me. Thank you for being lovely every time I reach out, lending me your time. I appreciate it so much. And this series wouldn't be what it is without people saying yes and being like, yeah, I want to talk about my team. Absolutely. Let's talk about it. So I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's another lovely conversation. I've enjoyed every conversation we've had, and I've enjoyed following each other on Twitter. So yeah, reaching out, and I'm definitely down for doing this next year and the year after and the year after.
Well, I will tell you this. Last year for the playoffs, I snuck and did the 14 teams that were in the playoffs. So if the Cardinals make it to the playoffs, you have a spot in the playoff series before. So nice. I will pencil you in as soon as they clinch, and I will be like, we're in there. We are doing this. So I didn't think I was going to do that, but it was actually pretty cool. Because you know how there's so many teams, but then when the season is over, then you start watching the teams, but you don't know anything about the teams because you've been watching your team. Right. So it's pretty cool to like get those fans on. So anyways, when they make the playoffs, we will do this again.
Sold.
Awesome.